Hello, everyone. As just stated, my name is Johnathan Hill, and I'm super excited to meet all of you. When I actually grew up in Washington, D.C., I oftentimes would hear it was super important to get a first job. Not only was it important for your family and finances, but it was super important because you wanted to contribute to society. That stuck with me. I'll be honest, I didn't necessarily know how to make that contribution happen, but I know I needed to. When you think about this idea, it's not a litmus test of how we measure people. But there does seem to be a strong correlation to whether it's wealth, happiness, let's be honest, or just general well-being. Now, my mom, I'm not going to give her the title of Oprah. She thought this was important too. But whenever this topic would come up, she'd actually always go back to, again, that idea of growing up in DC. And she would say, no matter what you do, as long as you educate yourself, love it, and also don't harm anyone in the process, that I'll be proud. That stuck with me. Really, really stuck with me. Mainly because, as you all can see in this audience and around the world, I'm 6'6", tall, 240, right? Complete opposite people. 5'5.5", and I knew that my career as an athlete was not going to take off. So I needed to make a pivot to figure out how I would make that societal contribution. I went on to go to Morehouse College, and that's really where this story starts to take off. You see, that note that my mom had gave me to really push me in life is something that I really took forward almost everywhere I went. And I'm sure, as many of you know, when you hit certain milestones, people just assume what comes next. Now, I was a poli-sci major, but I don't need everyone to tell me go run for office tomorrow, people. But also, I recognize that sometimes these are just based off of assumptions, things that those individuals have experienced, and I can't hold it to them. And to some degree, they were right. You see, I actually started my career working in tech, working for that company that you just heard of called LinkedIn, and it was awesome. Got to talk about connecting people to opportunity. I got to think about making all this great money. I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go tell the world that I got a job. Let's just say the reaction that I received was not the one that I thought I would. You see, most people assume that because I started my career in tech, that three things are typically happening. First thing they assume, you're there to meet a quota. Fair. The second thing that they would assume is you're getting paid the big bucks. I'm not an engineer, people. But the third thing that they would assume, and I think is appropriate, is technology has harmed too many marginalized communities, and how could you do this? Well, as you can imagine, I went back to my room and I started thinking, are they right? Am I going to now start contributing to platforms that widen racial gaps? Am I, again, a victim of this idea that go after and get that job, but don't worry about what you leave behind and what you run over in the process of doing it? Also, again, I did just graduate from school. Is there any job that I can get out in the world right now that's going to pay me at or even above the school tuition price? Because the brother got loans to pay. And I'm sure that's what most people think of when they go accept their first job. But being in tech, it was something different. It was a very cool opportunity. But this opportunity that I thought would exist, this actually made me realize that all those sentiments people were bringing up were very valid. You see, this idea that a company can do so many great things but also leave people behind is not something that's new to us. And in fact, it's something that we've gotten pretty used to. You see, being in the tech space, I think there were things that I just wasn't willing to address. I wasn't really willing to really bring to the kitchen table and tell my mom that in addition to this job, these things might happen as well. So let's actually talk about what some of these things may look like in real life. You see, technology is affecting almost every facet of where we believe we have freedom and choice. We'll go to voting. I think we've all heard about some of the legislative tactics that politicians are using to, again, make sure that people don't go to the polls and vote for the people that they want to. But also, it's countries like Russia that are using technology as well to target marginalized communities to actually prohibit them from going out to participate and vote. Now, when you think about some of the other places that this also is showing up, let's talk about advertisement, people. I know, advertisement. What are you talking about, man? There are actually organizations and individuals that are choosing to use race as a way to exclude individuals, whether you're looking for a home, you're looking for educational opportunity, or you're looking for, again, the love of your life. That's exactly what these platforms we thought when we were signing up are supposed to do. Yet many of the individuals that are behind the dollars, that are behind the strategies, are choosing to leverage maybe not race anymore, but zip codes, interests, and some of the other things that are helping identify who we are to exclude you from opportunities. Parents, I can't imagine what it's like choosing what school to send your child to today. My goodness. So just to know that, again, school systems are using technology to even the playing field, you would think that's the right thing to do. But evidence is actually showing that many of these school ranking systems are disproportionately affecting Black and brown kids and not giving them the opportunity that their parents think they deserve. That's harmful. But I think the one that really stood out for me, particularly being a young Black man, was to see technology used in the space of predictive policing. You see, I'm a huge fan of both safety and justice. I have family, they've been officers for years. One of my first internships was working for the police department. But also I recognize that justice is something that we should all be able to have. So to see law enforcement agencies investing in technology sounds like the right thing to do. Appropriately, they are thinking about how do we reduce violence. Appropriately, they are thinking about how do we use these tactics to create that community conversation. But as we all know, that's not the end result. What we know is that by using some of these tactics, this technology, it's actually led to an unintended increase in their surveillance, the arrest, and the detainment of Black and brown people. It means that more patrolling is happening in their communities. It means that they cannot walk out of their own home and feel safe, and it leads to even more interactions with police that, let's just be honest, are unwarranted. Now, again, I feel like anyone should be able to use technology to make their job easier, to be more effective and efficient. But at what cost? I think that's the question that we are left with. And I think that's the question that more tech companies have to start to reason with as well. So throughout my history, particularly in this space of the technology industry, I don't feel like much has changed over these past 10 years. If anything, I think that we just have more issues that are being talked about on bigger platforms, bigger media channels, but also they're just affecting everyone. And as a result, we have to do something about it. Now, as we know, any industry that's going unchecked, they typically harm Black and brown communities the most and leave them at risk. And the FCC, like many other agencies, is actually charged with the authority to make sure that there are no abuses of power as it relates to communications and technology. But let's just say that majority of the regulations that they've put out have been lax. So we've not had as much interest, yet alone, as much legislation to address these issues. So these next couple of minutes, I definitely want to talk about my solutions to solve this, but I also want you to take a moment and recognize that these aren't things that we solve alone, nor do we only solve today. You see, the first place that I truly believe there's an opportunity is always going to start with people. It isn't just a matter of looking at these individuals as your consumers, but you got to give them a chance to also be your employee. Now, when I first started my job at LinkedIn, I thought, wow, this is a cool company, everyone knows it, and they're creating opportunity for all. But when I walked into the office on my first day, I didn't see many people that looked like me. That was a shock. I started to engage in meetings and activities and started going to events or even happy hours, and I didn't feel like I belonged. So what would you do about it? Well, on this platform that's connecting people to opportunity, I just signed online and started referring people to the company. That was my personal mission to change what's happening around me. But at the organizational level, it has to look different. So yes, we have to advocate for more equitable hiring practices because who am I to say that the demographic of these tech companies are exactly what they should be? But we also must advocate for more equitable hiring practices on every level and at every function within these organizations. So yes, we need the executive, but we need the intern too. Yes, we need more Black and brown folks in HR, but don't forget about hiring us in engineering as well. And sure, I don't mind being an individual contributor, but I also believe that I'm equipped, have the skills and experience to also be your frontline manager. That's the kind of intelligent risk that we need more organizations to take to put us in a position to thrive. Because as it says here on this slide, it is not very reassuring to know that this industry that truly is influencing economic mobility has a workforce of only 7.4% of Black people. Which brings me to my next piece, community. People, we gotta be intentional. We can't just talk about it, we gotta be about it. I think one of the things that I heard when I was younger that's always stuck in with me is that, Johnathan, you can't save the hood. All right. Well, in my professional life, I've rephrased that. While we can't save the hood, and nor should we try, what we can do is influence hearts. And if we reach enough of them, I think that's when real change starts to happen. You see, it's more than just, again, hiring these individuals and making sure that your software isn't harming a community. When's the last time you went to that community and asked them how do they want to be helped? That's the difference in the approach that we need with community, and that's also the reason why these communities are waiting and wanting us to come to them. Because again, as we've seen over these last 2 years and even the brutal murder of George Floyd, 50 of the largest public companies and foundations have committed over $50 billion to racial inequities. And as you can imagine, any racial inequity that we want to get in front of should be addressed. But we also have to be cautious. So for anyone working at one of these organizations, yes, I want you to be hesitant whenever you hear a new initiative is coming out where we want to support a community. But I also want you to be slightly curious. I want you to think about what is your role in solving that issue and how we can ensure that individuals that are going to be supported have a voice at the table as well. And I think that brings me to my last piece here, transparency. People, it's true. I was a poli-sci major and I do want to run for office one day. But I do recognize one thing, you can't do it alone. Transparency is not only about regulation, but it's also about community oversight. It's ensuring that, again, every industry, every agency has an opportunity to be checked, but also has an opportunity to understand what are the protocols, what are the bureaucracies that we have to go through. Unfortunately, the tech industry has gotten a pass, people. Because it's a lot younger, they aren't receiving as much scrutiny, and they're allowed to engage in certain patterns and predictions that, honestly, we can't stop. That doesn't mean that we don't do anything. It means that we gather a group like we've done today, and that we do it together. So, as we start to think about how do we end this revolution of technology really harming communities that we care most about, I want you all to think about something for me. I want you to take this idea here that we all have a role and responsibility to change the way in which technology affects us. But I also want you to think about this idea that you all, as individuals, have an opportunity to do it within your own circumstance and sphere. I remember my mom. She often would talk about how she wanted to move her kids from the suburbs, or at least I apologize, from an urban community to the suburbs to really escape impoverished conditions. My mom, again, she had 3 children. She really just wanted us to go out and make good and do good on the world. So when she found out that her 3rd youngest, again, was stopped by police on his way to his first job with the police department, she was shocked. Her question was, why the heck would he be stopped now? Suspicion. Suspicion that, again, there have been break-ins in the neighborhood, and these Black teens, you seem to fit the description. Thankfully, this kid had a card in his back pocket. This kid had a card that said, I actually work for the police chief. That is the only reason why guns went back in the holster and the police officers told that young person, go on about your day. That's the unintended consequence of predictive analytics and technology, specifically when racial bias comes into play. And when you all think about, gosh, I hope this isn't something that happens to everyone. Oh my gosh, I'm glad this didn't happen to anyone that I know. You can now change that because that person was me. As I think about what happens next and how I can get you all to understand what I do for a living, I go back to this quote. You see, Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall's mentor was actually his professor at Howard University. And he would oftentimes tell his students that the law was about creating, again, social engineers, not parasites. And Thurgood Marshall will go on to say that he wanted to use the law as a tool to make sure that happened. Well, I feel the same way about technology. I feel like we have an opportunity to do something right and do something good. So I ask you, as you think about how do we engage moving forward, think about me. Think about those communities that are truly being affected, and think that this conversation can't end today. While we all want to take action, I think it's okay if we just start with communication and conversation. Thank you.